CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin. Are you thinking about celebrating Friendsgiving soon as we approach Thanksgiving? Well, research shows the key to a longer and healthier life, better mental health, is actually in our relationships. It's a topic that research psychologist Dr. Kimberly Horn covers in her new book, Friends Matter for Life. It was just released. It has an 8-tenet framework, and we're going to talk all about it. Dr. Horn, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me, Kara.
So we're coming off a divisive election. We're heading into Thanksgiving. I know a lot of folks are nervous about relating with people, and you have some ideas about that, because it's more than just being kind or trying not to offend someone. Our relationships directly impact our well-being and our longevity.
Yes, yes. So, as you said, we're going into this holiday season, and I think that it's on our minds. In fact, a third of Americans right now are thinking about separating or not spending time with their friends and family because of differences in political views.
So what has changed? Okay, I'm old enough to remember that, even not that long ago, people would disagree, but with maybe more respect. There was never talk of that if your husband and wife had different ideas, that they would maybe get divorced or that friends would no longer speak to each other. How have we gotten so divisive, and how is that a problem for us with our well-being?
I think that we have become more quick to cancel people. And I think that certainly social media has made that easier to, uh, that there's no nuance. I mean, there's just, I'm not going to be friends with that person, and it's very black and white. But I guess what I want to present is that we have options other than canceling people. And I'm not saying that it's an easy topic to deal with, but I think that there are some reasonable options to pursue.
I mean, you have
And no, go ahead.
I was going to say, you've got 30 years of health research. You've published in many scientific publications, more than 100 of them. And what's really clear with your work that maybe people aren't as clear on is that loneliness or disenfranchisement has a huge consequence on our long-term health and our mental health.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, there are higher risk of heart disease when we're lonely. There's a higher risk of heart disease, of stroke, of dementia. There are all sorts of things that go into play when loneliness really takes over. And when I think about this season upon us where there's such divide with people that we care about. I mean, I'm not talking about strangers. I'm talking about the divide that exists right now with people that we love and care about. And I think one of the main things that I want to get across is that we can approach these situations while still at the same time taking care of ourselves and our mental health. And I like to refer to that as self-friending. And
Self-friending.
self-friending means that we approach ourselves with the same kindness and advice and compassion we would show a friend. And I think that we can put that into practice while at the same time trying to navigate these complicated situations with friends and family. So one of the first things we can do as we think about the holiday approaching or new conversations occurring with friends and family is to not engage in political dialogue, especially if it's raw and it's painful. I think that we can still be with the people we love and care about and find other ways to connect, common interests, the things that brought us together in the first place, some of our bonds that brought us together. I mean, if you have someone that you walk with during the week, walk with them. If you have someone you play golf with, play golf with them. You can keep certain topics off limits right now. You are under no obligation to engage in political conversations with anyone.
Yeah, you're giving
So
us the
that's what
blessing
we
that
can
it's,
do.
yeah, you say it's okay to avoid certain topics to preserve a
Yes.
friendship. So instead, we focus on shared values. So do we outwardly say that and say, listen, I know we're not on the same side about this. Let's just not talk about politics. Do we say that up front?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important to have that conversation and to draw those boundaries. And that is a step toward taking care of yourself and your mental health while making an effort to preserve the friendship. Now, you might not always stay in that particular stage with someone, because the second tip that I have is to mutually agree to have a conversation about the things that are challenging for you. So you can do that also with the conversation of drawing some boundaries around that. Maybe there's a particular topic you agree to discuss, but it's mutually agreed and it's done with the intention to understand, not to challenge and argue. And I also
Yeah.
recommend having that conversation in a place that feels safe.
Okay, so you say one of the things that we need to do is we can really brush up on our listening skills and prioritizing our curiosity over judgment. You know, my child said to me the other day, she's like, you know, we were coming out of going to mass, and she said, you know, in church they tell you that you're supposed to tolerate everyone, and then she's like, but on the news, like, people who are most religious are so upset about these things. You know, that was a child's view. But how do we just not take someone's beliefs so personally? Because it seems like families are breaking up with the idea of, if you did this or if you voted for that person, you must not care about me, when that's not really what's happening.
Yeah. And again, I think it's important to think about the framing of that relationship in the first place. And if that relationship is still one of love and care and kindness and respect, those are the things that I recommend focusing on foremost. I like to say sometimes to follow people in their, in their actions toward you. And that doesn't mean that you can't have these difficult conversations, because I think that sometimes the first recommendation that I gave leads to two. If you can be in a space and feel trusted and maybe just give some time to heal and still enjoy, or spend time with people you love, my hope is then that will lead to conversation that feels respectful. And I'm not recommending that we avoid our feelings, but I think it's important to have those discussions.
Well, you say part of it is you can step back from a friendship that has become dominated by animosity or hostility. So if this particular friend or loved one is important to you, but just doesn't want a boundary, like just wants to go at it and like, how could you say this, or I'm about this, or then what do we do?
So that comes to tip number 3. So is to give yourself permission to step back, because I think when an interaction with someone becomes draining, hostile, and it is consistently that way, that it's okay to hit pause, because sometimes hitting the pause button is exactly what you need to take care of yourself. And we need to give ourselves permission to do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are quitting someone, that you're giving up on that relationship. It means that you are preserving a space for yourself and potentially giving time to heal that so you can go back to that relationship. Now, and that's an ideal situation. It may not work out, but at least you've put the effort into taking care of yourself first in this.
You know, it's sad because I've also seen I've seen some research and some articles that family estrangement now is more common than it ever was before. And sometimes that might be for a healthy reason. If you have a parent, people
Sure.
don't like talk about mothers who may actually not be our stereotype mother. And if you're with someone from your family of origin who's really constantly hurting you, I imagine you would say that it's good to set a boundary, or maybe even estrangement is a healthy thing to do. But are we getting to a point where we're also just like, forget it, you know, I can't even talk to you, it's too difficult, and there's estrangement over things because we just don't have the skills that you're talking about in your book?
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it is important to consider our skills, and that's why I call these practices of self-friending as a practice, or communicating as a practice, or knowing how to recalibrate relationships as a practice. And they are skills that we have to work on. And I think especially over the last few years post-pandemic, we all could use a little social skills brush up.
And so this is research that you are bringing to the forefront, because these broken relationships, loneliness, is actually creating problems, not only with our mental health, but physical health.
Yeah, physically. As I mentioned, it when people are experiencing excessive loneliness and isolation, and we see increases in blood pressure, and certainly heart disease, cognitive function as well.
Yeah, even memory loss,
So I
right?
mean, yeah, there's a whole host of health issues that come with isolation and loneliness, and that it's important at any age, but as we age, as we get older, it becomes increasingly important to have those social connections.
Is there a magic number, like, you know, you need to have X number of good, healthy relationships in order to have a protective factor?
I wish I wish we could quantify that, but I think it's more about the quality of the
Okay.
relationship that you have, and certainly, having more than one, incrementally more than one with each increment, it upgrades our health, but there's not a set point on that.
Okay. So, but again, if you're feeling like, I don't have a ton of friends, I've only got this one person who's always there for me, that can be a protective factor, especially as people are getting older and maybe they're alone a lot, and you're worried about the elderly and losing some of their cognitive function from loneliness. We know that loneliness is a huge health risk. Just having a couple close friends that you can have be witness to your life can really make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's important that we all have at least one or two people that we feel seen and heard by.
You know, I just got back from, it wasn't Friendsgiving, but it was a friend's 50th birthday. It was one of my sorority sisters. We were all invited up to the Catskills to just kind of get away from our crazy lives and kind of relive, this 30-year friendship we've had since college. And it was such an amazing feeling, even though it was difficult to get there and take the time off. And oh my gosh, I mean, people get so, but why do we feel so much better when we're around good friends?
Yeah, you get those feel-good hormones. I mean, you get your oxytocin, and you get your endorphins. Those really, like, physiologically just light up our hearts and our bodies.
Do you worry about, as I know a lot of people who listen to this show or watch it are parents, and I sometimes think I worry about the cancel culture, and not that there hasn't always been teen drama, but to see how I've seen my daughter go through things with like a best friend, and then all of a sudden they don't speak to you anymore over something seemingly simple. Is this younger generation sort of being robbed of good friendship skills, and is that a problem?
Well, I don't want to make a general statement. I think it's we certainly see some challenges because of the intensity and frequency of online interaction, and that does create some challenges for the face-to-face, really, reading body language and physical touch, and those sorts of things that are very important for bonding.
Yeah, I mean, let's bring up the book cover so I can show everyone. Your book has just been released. It's called Friends Matter for Life. And this is harnessing the 8 tenets of dynamic friendship. So we've talked about some of the 8 things, and there's a lot of practical skills in here. But what do you mean when you say dynamic friendship?
Yeah. So dynamic, meaning that one, it can sustain itself over time, and it can move with you and the ups and downs and ins and outs of adult friendship and still feed you. That's very important to have that dynamic because people are complex. And I think using some of the tenets in my book, it helps us really understand and navigate all those ins and outs and the complex nature of relationships and friendships,
We're going to talk a little bit
especially
more.
as we get older.
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the practical skills because I know everyone needs that. We're just going to take a very short break to hear from our sponsor.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
And welcome back. Where social disconnection is becoming so much more common, sadly. We're speaking with Dr. Horn, who uses science-based research. She provides practical guidance on how friends can really improve our longevity, prevent memory loss, boost our mood, even lower the risk of serious health issues like heart disease and depression. So I want to talk, we talked a little bit this on Great Day Connecticut, but when you see someone who's going through such a tough time and you know that their mood could be better if they even just got out with some of their friends, yet in those low places, people tend to want to isolate. How do we get over that? How do you help someone who might be going through depression actually reintegrate with some friendships as a mental health protection?
Yeah, I mean, I think that navigating or friendship can be difficult at any age, but especially as we get older, it becomes more complicated because there are a whole host of other things that come into play as we age, and certainly, as you mentioned, the feelings of depression or isolation or anxiety, those sorts of things happen, of course. But I think there are several things that happen, major life transitions, particularly when we look at the age group around what we call the young old, around 65 to 75. A lot of major transitions, unprecedented transitions happen at that point. It might be retirement, it might be empty nest, it might be relocating, it might be aging parents that need attention and care. So we're faced with that age group in particular is faced with new challenges that they haven't had to deal with before. But that also comes with opportunities. I mean, more free time and the opportunities to go back and revisit old hobbies and new experiences and those sorts of things. So I think there are a series of steps. I don't know that we have time to go into all of them today, but there are a series of just a few steps I would recommend as people begin to try to overcome some of the isolation that they're feeling, to take that step out.
Yeah. Well, what's step one? We
like
do have some time. I love the podcast because we take a deeper dive, but I know you mentioned doing some things in a comfortable setting can be a good way to start.
Yeah, I like to think about this as like a pathway of connection, and think about some markers along the way that might be familiar, like the trailhead. So the trailhead is that place where you can start and feel comfortable. It's familiar. It's well marked. You can start by maybe it's a church, maybe it's a co-op or a neighborhood, a community center, something like that that you're familiar with. That you can maybe jump in and get started with something where there's some people there that you already know, so it's not completely unfamiliar. So go familiar first, I would recommend.
Yeah, and the book goes into this in even a deeper manner than we can. But Friends Matter for Life, actually endorsed by one of my favorite podcasters, Mel Robbins. But it's an 8-tenet framework. Yes, and Mel, I love her because I don't know her personally, but she's just so authentic and can talk about this. So, do you think? We're talking about our teens being the anxious generation. We have a lot of elderly folks living alone. Are we sort of at a crisis point? And this is a real need to understand how we need to reconnect with friends across our lifespan?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, Kara, this is at an epidemic level.
Mm.
This is unprecedented loneliness right now,
Mm.
and we're seeing it across generations.
So we've talked about our kids, but I was so relieved when my mother wanted to move into a congregate type housing and now has gone to assisted living. She did that younger than, you know, she was still in her 60s, but she was divorced and alone, and she just thought, I need to be around people, you know, total extrovert. I know some people are really coping with how are they going to be with their parents. They're so busy with their own family and the sandwich generation, and so many elderly folks are just living alone. And that loneliness is as bad for them as smoking, you have found. So what do we do if we want to help those that we love reconnect and actually boost their health?
Yeah. Well, I think there are some things that you could recommend. I mean, these what I call waypoints or quick check-ins, just for so that people. I mean, maybe it's a text, maybe it's just having a cup of coffee with someone. But research has shown that even those very brief interactions bring joy and hope and fulfillment into people's lives, especially some people in the older generation. So those quick check-ins are very important.
Okay, so even if you're just calling your mom real quick on the way to work and say, I don't have time to talk, I'm just calling to see how you're doing, that couple of
Yes.
minutes matters. And so in some ways,
Matters.
quantity over quality.
I mean, so quantity is important, but that kind of check-in also can be quality because it brings people a sense of joy and hopefulness and something to look forward to. I have a group of friends that I text good morning to almost every single morning.
Aw.
And I love that. I mean, I love having that connection and knowing that I get those good mornings, right back to me. And it's quick and it's easy, but it really means a lot.
You know, it's interesting. That might be something the younger generation does better. I'm always telling my daughter to get off of Snapchat or whatever, but they're always, every little thing is being shared. But beyond, so you found that those using tech, whether it be a quick text or maybe a quick FaceTime check-in with our parents or something like that, can matter. But how much is important that we actually be in person to look each other in the eyes, touch each other's hands, be there?
There's little replacement for that. So I think that's very important. And even going back to the waypoints, the brief visits, even in person, if it's brief, it's very important.
Okay.
And I think the flip side of that, I think it's also important to encourage them to reach out, to have those connections with others. And technology is an important bridge. So especially with an older generation who may have some limitations with mobility or transportation even, through technology, some of those gaps can be bridged.
Are there other countries who do it a lot better than us? I don't know if you studied that in your research, but where do we fall as Americans? Are we kind of bad at this, or other countries who kind of all live together and do stuff in community forever, are they way far ahead when it comes to this?
Well, I mean, the loneliness crisis right now is worldwide.
It is. Okay,
So
we're not just
I
the
think
only ones.
many countries are struggling with a loneliness crisis.
So as we have our final 5 minutes together, and you've got 8 tenets. Number one, if we can take something away that you can start doing today, it actually starts with ourself, which is interesting, self-friending. I'm not sure why that is when we're talking about other people, but why is it so important, and how do we do that again?
Yeah, so self-friending means showing up for yourself with the same kindness, advice, care, and compassion that you would offer a friend. And I say that, I mean, that is the 8th tenet.
Okay.
And I think that tenet is one of the most important tenets because if we don't love and take care of ourselves, then it's much more difficult to show up in full for other people. And I think oftentimes the way that we treat ourselves is a reflection of how we treat others.
Okay, so when we are kinder to ourselves, we naturally might be kinder to others. Let me ask you, did your research talk about animals? I know so many people love their animals, and can animals help bridge the gap?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think that in if you think about grounding exercises or techniques that help us, that calm us and
Hmm.
soothe us, certainly, petting, cuddling, our furry friends is up there for grounding.
Okay, so we still need people. It's not going to heal the loneliness epidemic, but the animals can help us feel good, help us regulate our emotions. You really also talk about being a better listener. This is so important,
Mhm.
I think. Psychologically, in your research, why is it important to be such a better listener, to be a good friend, and how do we do that?
Because I think everyone wants to be seen and heard. And I mean, those are just some natural instincts that we have in the world, is to know that someone sees us. And when we show up with the intent to listen first and try to understand someone, it strengthens our bond.
And so, if we're going to be around that Thanksgiving table with strained relationships due to the current divisive climate that we're
Mhm.
in, um, listening is one tip. What's something else, a takeaway you'd like people to remember as they go into the holiday season so they can keep those important relationships?
Yeah, I think that if you're going into a family or friend situation where you know there is potential conflict, you may or may not be hosting, but it might be important to set some ground rules in advance. If certain conversations need to be, off topic for that particular gathering, then I think it's important for people to know that in advance so they can prepare themselves.
Yeah, so you gave us the free pass. It is okay to set boundaries, to maybe avoid political conversation if needed. If you do engage in dialogue, you say it's really important to be respectful, even if you really disagree with the other person's views.
Yeah. To approach it with the attempt to understand and with curiosity rather than the intent to win an argument.
So that old saying, it's better to be kind than to be right. Yeah.
Sometimes that is the case.
At least,
And
at least with
um,
friendship.
I yeah, I mean, I think leading with kindness is very important.
Yeah. And so, we appreciate your time with us, Dr. Horn. I know you've been featured in many publications, from the New York Times to the Atlantic, all over. The book, I'll show folks one more time before if you're listening in the car or you want to share this with your friends, bookmark it. It's Harnessing the 8 Tenets of Dynamic Friendship, or Friends Matter for Life, by Dr. Kimberly Horn. So I think it helps us to remember that friendship is important for our health. And so these relationships are worth it and worth our work. So thank you for helping us understand better how to navigate them.
Thank you, Carol, for having me, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for those folks watching at home, we love to share this content on social media. You can follow me at Kara Sundlin or join the CURES Facebook group. Of course, find Dr. Horn as well. Have a great day and be well.
CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.